Here's the presentation on moving to Forge in the cloud with your existing .NET experience. My name is Augusto Gonçalves. I'm a Forge developer advocate at Autodesk. So let's get started. For over a decade, Autodesk have improved its .NET APIs for desktop applications. And you as a developer may have learned how to use that in your desktop applications. So what about the cloud? Now with the cloud we have a lot of new technologies, and how can we use the same experience to improve or how to expand our applications to the cloud with our .NET expertise. So this class will review what we need to do to use .NET for cloud and get you ready to use Autodesk Forge, cloud-connected apps, and web-based applications. So these are the key learning objectives. To discover the .NET technologies available, learn about integrations, other web services, learn about steps necessary to use Forge with .NET, and some tips and tricks for existing .NET applications. So let's get started with the migration roadmap. So if you're planning to develop or to migrate your application that is now on .NET, most likely your application is still on the desktop app. So it's your application here, your application is standalone. We also have the same idea with our AutoCAD, Revit, and Inventor applications. Those are our desktop applications. And we also have some hybrid applications like Fusion. Those hybrid applications, they work on the cloud with features from the cloud, but they also have a lot of features on the desktop client. We also have cloud applications like BIM 360, Team Docs, Fusion Team, etc. And of course, Forge is the API that we're using to build those cloud applications. So let's say we want to migrate your application. We're also doing part of that, right? To get your application as a hybrid application. And then eventually you may consider moving your application to a full cloud environment. So if that's the case, right? So hybrid applications, they are also known as cloud connected applications, right? And to use that, we have a learning curve for it. The first step we need to take care is about security. That's extremely important when dealing with hybrid or cloud applications, because the data is flowing around between the desktop and the server. So always worry about security. REST is a common concept. It's basically a protocol used to transfer data from server to client and server to server. And JSON, which is basically the basic data format used to transfer that data. For cloud applications, we are most likely going to use REST Sharp, which is a .NET implementation for REST. Newtonsoft JSON, which is a library to handle JSON objects. And of course, Autodesk Forge, which is a library used to use Autodesk APIs, Autodesk Forge APIs. So more about security, always take that in mind. DLLs and exe files are not secure. They will eventually get broken because it's on the client. The client can just keep trying, and .NET assemblies can be decompiled. So it's not a good place to store sensitive information. And if you're doing desktop development with .NET, check some tools like Confuser X, which will allow you to obfuscate your code and make it harder for someone to crack into your code. And about security, take the application the security as on the architecture level. So design for security and keep the sensitive information on the server. Never keep sensitive information on the client. And whenever you're transferring data from A to B, always encrypt the information and when the information is stored. So the hybrid architecture that we are going to explore in this class is about having a desktop application that will make request response to a cloud module. So that cloud module or cloud app is where you keep the sensitive information. That cloud module will then connect to Forge or connect to any other cloud providers, get the information we want, and then send that information back to the desktop. So that way, the information is flowing from the desktop to your cloud, and then to Forge and or other providers, and then back to your cloud module, and then to your desktop. That way, the cloud module acts like a proxy that will not expose information that you don't want to expose to the desktop client. So that's the basic architecture that we need. A desktop application that will connect to the cloud, your cloud application, then connect to the cloud resources you need. And again, never store sensitive information on the desktop client because that will eventually get broken. So let's do a quick demonstration of those hybrid applications. Let's start with a two-legged scenario. In that case, the application is connecting directly to Forge to get the data. There is no user login and sign in. Just your application is transparently using Forge APIs to allow any features. So in this case, the sample is available on GitHub, github.com/autodeskforge/mod-derivative C# context menu. In this case, I have a desktop application that will connect to my cloud, upload a Revit model. That model will then upload to Forge, translate on Forge, and send back to create a spreadsheet. So which are the steps? First, the desktop client will upload a file and receive back from the cloud just a unique ID. It's a random unique ID. That will be the token that the desktop will connect back to this cloud application. The cloud authorized with Forge upload the file and post a translation job. The desktop client can then use the unique ID to check with the cloud module if the application is ready. The application will then get the metadata from Forge, will transform that metadata into a spreadsheet file and send that to the desktop client. So that's interesting because the desktop client doesn't know about Forge and it's not accessing any Forge API, but yet only accessing this unique ID that is used to pass the data and check for the data. So let's see this running. So I have here Visual Studio running, and I have the sample that I want to run. Let me click here to start the sample. So on this sample I have three projects. The first one is just adding the context menu. The second one is the desktop client, and the third one is the translation service. So if I right click on the project and go to properties, I can see that only the translation service will start when I start the project. So let me start here. So now the project is running as the cloud module, and I can right click on a file and I see this menu here, which is extract properties. So when I click here, it's going to start the desktop application, and I can see right here at the bottom uploading the file to my cloud module. Once the file is uploaded to the cloud module will then send that file to Forge. So here's my code on my cloud module endpoint receiving the file from my desktop application, and will then get the file and upload the file to Forge, and finally post a translation job. At the very end, I'm going to send back the unique ID, which is in this case the bucket ID. So just wait for it. It's running and uploading the file from desktop to the cloud module, then to Forge, and at the end I will see the unique ID. So here's the unique ID that the client will see, and let's continue. Now the translation is running. So the desktop client is asking the cloud module if the translation is ready, and the desktop will then get the status, which will be like 0%, 10%, etc. So it should pop up again with the updated stats. So 35%, 90%. So now it's going to download the spreadsheet file from it. So now it's the desktop client is asking for the cloud module for the Excel file. So it's just asking if the file is ready. If the file is ready, it's going to run some code on that metadata to create a spreadsheet. So let's just keep running this. And don't worry about this, it's just a debugging feature. Let's see if that's ready. Not yet. Okay, so now the file is created. And I can see here's the file that was created. So the desktop communicates to my cloud module. My cloud module communicates to Forge, translate the data. My cloud module gets the data, creates a spreadsheet, and sends to the client. Note that in this case, the desktop is not aware of Forge, but just uploading a file and receiving another file in return. So the next sample is a three-legged scenario. So in this case, the desktop application will connect, it will redirect the browser sign in to my cloud application. My cloud application will add the user ID and seek the Forge client ID. The user will then go to Forge, authenticate, enter the credentials. Forge will call back my application. My application will exchange that code for a token, and we will store that token on a database and send back to the client just a random ID. So the desktop client will store that ID, which is the identification. So with that identification, the desktop can then request information passing that unique ID. The cloud module check that unique ID and to get the access token on the database, go to Forge, get the information we want, then filter transform the information in a way that makes sense for the application, and send back the information to the client, and the client will then output the results on the desktop. So let's see this example running. So let me close this and stop this sample and close solution. So the other sample that we are running is the desktop sample. In this case, I just have two modules, the desktop and the cloud module. All the sensitive information is kept on the cloud module right here. So as you can see, I have my keys on the web config, but it's not here, is stored, right? Because otherwise we'll commit that data. And here are my desktop application that will then connect to my cloud module. As I can see on the app config, the desktop application knows the address of the cloud module, like this. And if I go to properties, I can see that when I click start, both projects will start, the cloud and the desktop. In this case, everything is running on my computer. I'm also using C# as the library for the browser. I would recommend that instead of using the native .NET browser, because that's not secure, and there are some problems with cookies. So when I start my application, my desktop application will open a browser and redirect to my cloud page, and that cloud page will then add the client ID and go to Autodesk for sign in. So then I can see at this space here my the sign in form, and then I can type my data. Now the Forge is calling back my cloud module with the code. With that code, I can then exchange for a token. And in this case, I'm storing all the information on a database right here on a database. And then I'm sending to the client the ID from the database. So that's the ID for that user. But I'm not sending like this, I'm sending that encrypted. So only this server knows how to decrypt that information and get that information on the server, and then send that back to the client. If I come right here, I can see my database. I'm using a MongoDB, it can be any other database. So I see the ID from the client, the access token, the refresh token, and when that access token will expire. So now the desktop client knows how to will have that information, and we'll know how to call the server, my cloud module. So now my desktop application is using the unique ID to get the username for this user. So this my desktop application is trying to call my cloud module, is calling my cloud module API Forge user profile, passing the to ask for the user data. Every time it also passes the session ID as a header on the request. So if I move to the next line, I can see that the session ID is like this. It was decrypted, and then with that session ID I can go to the database, get the access token. So now I have the access token for that user. I can also refresh the access token if needed, and then my cloud module will use Forge APIs to get the username and return that to the user. The next step, my desktop application will then request the cloud module for the list of hubs. Note that I'm not returning the full list of hubs, but yet a filtered list of hubs. I don't want to return everything to the client, right? So now I can see the list of hubs. I can then navigate to a file that I want in here. Let's say, let me get a file. So this is one file. When I request a file, it's going to my cloud module for a web page that will show the file. And you can see here that on my viewer, I'm proxying everything from that viewer to my server. So the client, the Forge access token is not exposed to the client. So everything is proxied on the server. So now I will see the module, and with this scenario, the only thing that this client knows is it's his or her unique ID for that session that is handling with the server. This is not the Autodesk for access token, but yet a token that I'm keeping on my server. So this Ceph Sharp is quite interesting. It's refreshed really well, and I can then navigate to my module. Okay, so that's the desktop and cloud application. So let's close this solution and come back here. So now the next one is cloud applications, full cloud applications run on the browser. So we can do a two-legged and three-legged again. And I have two samples. One is for two-legged and another one is for three-legged. So in this case, I can just open that on the browser, model derivative. So everything is running on my cloud application. Nothing is running on desktop or anything else. So it's just a list of buckets I have on Forge, and I can then, for each of those buckets, then I can upload a file, like right-click, upload a file, and for that file I can then right-click, translate, and if I click on the file, it should appear right here. Let's just translate the file. So this is just a simple file. And the other one is a two-legged sample, Forge Data Management application. In this case, it's going to redirect me to the Autodesk sign-in page, so I can enter my credentials. So I will type in my credentials. And from there, it will list all my files, hubs and projects, so I can drill down to what I want. In this case, again, when I click on a file and try to view that on the model, all the requests are being proxied through the server. So this viewer is requesting my server for the access token, and for the data, the cloud module adds the token and redirect to Forge, get the response and send back to the client without the token. So that's the best way we're exposing data directly. Again, here I have this export to Excel. It's basically doing the same thing, but on the browser instead of having a desktop application. So two different ways of doing the same feature. So those are the two samples. Moving forward, what customers want. So we can, in most cases, the user wants to access the data. It can be on a desktop application, on a browser client, or a mobile application. So it's up to you to expose what we want. So in all those cases, the desktop, browser, or mobile will make requests and get responses from your cloud application. Your cloud application can then connect to a database to get information that it needs, like in this sample to get the access token. Connect to Forge to get information on Forge. Connect to other storage providers. So that's the full scenario, like what we are aiming to. But the real goal here is always to have the data at the center of your approach. Allow user to access the data whenever he wants, and always keep at the center of your architecture. So that's the ultimate goal. So what's next? Next, we have to worry about deployment. So if we have a desktop application and that connects to a cloud or a full cloud application, we need to host that somewhere live. It can be on something as easy and free as App Harbor. It connects to GitHub very easily. You can also use Microsoft Azure or also AWS, like AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which is one of many ways of deploying your .NET applications. And for more information, take a look at the developer.autodesk.com, our blog, and of course, samples on GitHub. So github.com/AutodeskForge for more samples. And there is always the ugly truth about migrating applications. There is not something that is that easy, right? So always ask for help. Use well-tested package. Keep in mind that you have to design for security. To not expose your data during your architecture development. And keep in mind that the cloud will bring you connectivity, benefits, and a better experience for your user, as long as you keep that security, you keep the data at the center, and allow user to access what he wants when the user wants. So that's it. Thank you. Here's my email contact if you have any questions. And follow on Twitter to get updates and new code samples and whatever I'm posting on. Thank you very much.